A bit of space debris weighing about 2,800 kilos, a part of a rocket, has just crashed into the far side of the moon on the 4th of this month, and astronomers for many days didn't know exactly where this bit of rocket came from. There were two suspects, SpaceX and China, but both have denied that the rocket is theirs. The piece of debris is a part of a rocket that was launched in the past and has now been identified as a spent or used part of a Chinese rocket. It has been tracked for a few weeks, and astronomers have been aware that it was going to crash into the moon. Serendipitously, this is an opportunity for science because the piece of debris is an impactor and can reveal to us some new information potentially. But the larger takeaway from this incident is that of the growing problem of space debris, of which the space and satellite industry is also cognizant and is raising alarms now. I'm Sandhya Ramesh, and this is Pure Science. First, what kind of space debris was this? The one thing that we know for sure about this bit of space junk was that it was a rocket stage, a booster stage. The booster of a rocket is typically a part of a rocket that carries fuel and provides thrust for the rocket to fly. Once the fuel is exhausted in a traditional rocket, that part or stage is jettisoned. With reusable rockets today, some stages can be brought back to Earth and reused. Or a booster could also be one of the supplementary individual support boosters for launch of very heavy rockets. They aid in providing additional thrust for lifting a much heavier mass. When this bit of space debris was first spotted and the trajectory to crash into the moon was determined, it was about late January of this year. At the time, astronomer Bill Gray, who was tracking the bit of debris as a part of his Project Pluto to track near-Earth objects, concluded that it was most likely the second or the upper stage of a Falcon 9 rocket, which belongs to SpaceX. Initial trajectory analysis showed that it was likely from a February 2015 launch of the Deep Space Climate Observatory or DISCOVER mission. But a few days later, in February, Gray said that he had made an error and that it was actually a part of the Long March 3C rocket that China had launched its Chang'e 5 T1 lunar mission on in October of 2014. DISCOVER actually never went past the moon on its way to its destination. The Chang'e 5 T1 mission did, and it was the predecessor to the Chang'e 5 mission which eventually returned samples from the moon. This 2014 mission, the spacecraft was actually a test mission or an experimental robotic mission to conduct atmospheric re-entry tests on the capsule that subsequently went up on Chang'e 5 and performed the sample return to Earth. After launch, this test mission went into a free return trajectory, which means that it moved from Earth and looped around the moon, and the gravity of the moon caused it to directly return to Earth without any propulsion. So, therefore, free return. The third stage booster of this rocket, the one that carried the capsule all the way to the moon, was ejected and left in orbit somewhere between the Earth and the moon. And it is this stage that crashed on the moon on the 4th of this month. There have been independent analysis of what this part could have been and what its origin was, and it was also confirmed by University of Arizona that it was indeed the Chinese rocket. They had performed spectral analysis to determine this based on the kind of paint that is used on the body of the rocket and the differences between the paint used by SpaceX and Chinese rockets. They also worked on how fast this piece of debris was spinning, and there were certain patterns of brightness that were also visible when sunlight reflected off it. China, as we know, does not release much data to the public about its space missions, and nothing much was known about this stage after the launch was completed. This bit of space debris, its orbit was very high and it posed no risk to Earth orbiting satellites. So it's everyone's guess that China thought that the empty booster would just keep continuing in its orbit for a very long time. Then, astronomers who were searching for near-Earth asteroids, as they regularly do, noticed it and tagged it as a bit of an asteroid. Then, later, they thought it was the Falcon 9 stage. 7 years after the launch of this mission and many flybys of the moon later for this bit of space debris, its orbit altered. The booster flew past the moon on 3 occasions that made very major changes to its orbit. These 3 were on September 18th of last year, on Jan 5th, and on February 5th of this year. The January flyby especially altered the object's trajectory, and it passed less than 12,000 km from the surface. Then, astronomers deduced that it will crash onto the surface in or somewhere near the Hertzsprung crater on the moon's far side on the 4th of March at about 12:26 UTC or close to 6 p.m. IST. The speed of the craft at the time of impact would have been 2.6 kilometers per second. Previously, rocket stages have indeed crashed on the moon, but not unintentionally. This is the first time that one is doing so without it being planned. Astronomers don't really get a lot of opportunities to closely track a bit of space debris before it collides into another body. A lot of space debris does fall back down to Earth, but most of smaller pieces burn up in the atmosphere. On the moon, there is no atmosphere, so this bit of space debris crashed into the surface. Its orbital mechanics were interesting. Since it was just a piece of inactive or inert waste, it had no propulsion on its own. It moved solely with its own inertia and energy, and also experienced the effects of solar radiation from the sun. So, it helped astronomers test their models and trajectory prediction physics. Another interesting thing to know would be what kind of impact crater the debris produced after it collided with the moon. Can we see the impact crater? From Earth, we really can't because the impact occurred on the far side of the moon, which is never facing the Earth. So, only orbiting spacecraft can actually see the site of impact. And luckily, there are 2 that are going around the moon right now that have the right opportunity to take a picture. NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, or LRO, and ISRO's Chandrayaan-2. These 2 map the whole moon and fly over all parts of the moon roughly once a month. They weren't around to see the impact as it occurred itself, and it would have been too expensive to alter their orbits. But over the next few days, they will start to send pictures of the impact site and the crater. The LRO will take its image on March 28th, and Chandrayaan will be able to image on April 4th. The problem of space debris is not new. Currently, there are over 5,000 active satellites orbiting the Earth and over 10,000 defunct satellites in orbit. And there are more than 36,000 individual pieces of debris that are over 10 centimeter wide and are being actively tagged and tracked. And as more and more satellites are launched on non-reusable rockets, space debris starts to pile up. A lot of it might burn up in the atmosphere if it falls back down to Earth and not really pose a threat directly to Earth, but they do pose a threat in the far future to other satellites and future occupiers of Earth orbit. In the very far future, if there's too much space debris and too many satellites, Earth orbit could theoretically become impassable and we might not be able to launch anything safely from the planet at all. That, of course, is in a very dystopian far future. A more realistic risk is a piece of debris colliding with another piece of debris or satellite, which can in turn create more bits of debris and cause runaway, uncontrolled cascading debris formation processes. This kind of runaway cascading processes, when built up to an extreme, is called Kessler syndrome. And some very large bits of space debris can actually also reach Earth intact. The problem of space debris is now being tackled seriously, or at least being thought of seriously. Many approaches to mitigation have already been proposed and are being experimented with. There are, of course, the things we know of, such as the development of reusable rockets, which reduces rocket stages that are left in space. There are also proposals to use external spacecraft and netted spacecraft to clean up space debris. Many such spacecraft would capture bits of space debris and then deorbit them or deorbit with the space debris together. Now there are also regulations being put in place about mandating deorbiting of satellites and mitigation of space debris. But all of these efforts are still in their initial stages today when compared to the scale at which we're launching things into space. If things don't really change much faster, the day might not really be far away when we start to hear actively about space debris in the news.